Namaste and welcome to Satsang. So welcome to everyone joining us today. Welcome to the new faces that are there. And today I'm going to finish reading from the Forgiveness course, which is a part of the Empowerment Courses Handbook. The Forgiveness course I really wrote because my own spiritual pathway really began with forgiveness of my own self. And coming to accept that I could never have been other than I was in any particular moment, so that any shoulds or shouldn'ts, as we learned from lesson 1 of the forgiveness course last week, really can come to be seen as a function of our egoic sense of self. Any idea that I should be different than I am in this moment, that you should be different than you are, makes sense from our egoic sense of self, but it's not really possible for us to be different than we are in this moment. And an acceptance of that completely allows us to evolve into something different in the next moment as this moment continues. So in lesson 2 we also looked at how the brain functions as a human being, how one side of our brain is really concentrated, we'll say, on time and space, and it sees in separation. It thinks about difference of appearance, it discerns and judges difference of how things look, sound, and it assumes that because two human beings look different, act different, like different things, that they actually are different. So the core of this forgiveness work is to come to understand that there is a higher way for us to function, and that to blame our old way is not going to allow us to move to the higher way. We can simply recognize that we perhaps haven't been working from the most efficient place to grow from, and simply let the old way stay where it is and move to this higher way. So we're going to continue with lesson 3 today, lesson 3 out of 4 of the forgiveness course. And you can, last week's recording is already on YouTube, so if you want to go back and you missed last week's, you can listen to those. So chapter 5 is lesson 3 of the forgiveness course, and it's called Immunizing Yourself Against Further Hurt. So how do we, moving forward in our life, how do we begin to live from this place where nothing can impact us? How do we come to that understanding that nothing has really hurt us? That's what this chapter is about. So the introduction. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at why someone's actions, words, or ideas about us can seem to hurt us. We'll analyze this process of what actually happens, and in doing so, enable ourselves to come to a realization that will stop any further hurt from occurring. This process will involve us moving to a higher level of consciousness, and is simple to understand once you have the correct information. As always in this course, we are going to learn the correct information and allow that to facilitate a shift to a higher level of consciousness. So just by having some information that we're not generally aware of as human beings, then a shift is going to occur inside anyway. And it's important to know this because can you imagine how you would feel if you knew for the rest of your existence, in this body at least, that you're in right now, that you could no longer be hurt or anything triggered inside by anything anyone does, says, or is, or you know, something in your environment that's lacking that you feel you need, or something you want to get rid of. None of those could trigger you ever again to feel bad. That's the importance of this lesson. There is a level of consciousness in which some people live every day that cannot be hurt or wronged by anyone else. This may sound incredible and impossible, but I would ask you to keep an open mind as you read through this lesson and come to see for yourself. Imagine, if you can, what it would be like to move through the world knowing that nothing anyone can do to you or say about you can hurt you. Wouldn't you automatically be more at peace and happier if this was how you were living? This understanding will also allow you to have more time, energy, and patience for other people too. There's no need to worry that if you're beyond being able to be hurt by others, that you will seem cold, uncaring, or selfish. In fact, you may find yourself more popular than ever. Understanding why we feel hurt when someone wrongs us. This might seem like the most obvious and pointless thing to explore, because we have been raised to believe that the actions, words, and behavior of other beings can have an impact on us. This is simply not true. And let's now expose another myth that we have come to believe very deeply and without question. The myth is, other people can do and say things that can harm or cause injury to me, either my physical body or my sense of self. To understand why this is not true, we need to explore what we actually think of as ourselves. Most people feel that they are their physical body, their emotions, their thoughts and ideas about themselves, others, and the world in general. So our basic idea is that I am this body, I am the emotions that are felt in it, I am the thoughts that I have about myself, the world in general, and everyone else. All of this together is what most of us assume is me, and it's never questioned. We also believe that this is all that we are a body and mind, and that there is nothing else to us that is more permanent. We'll look at what we really are in lesson 4, but for now, we can focus on the aspects of ourselves listed above. If we really look at number 3 on that list, which is our thoughts about ourselves, the world, etc., we'll see it's really a collection of thoughts. It's only a set of ideas of what we think is true about ourselves. So my sense of me is made up of what I think about myself, what I think about everyone else, what I think about the world, all my memories, my history, all my dreams and anticipations for the future. All of that is happening on a thought level, and they're familiar to me. So I even begin to call that me, myself, part of myself. These thoughts range from thoughts about our physical body to thoughts about our psychological self, and have often been called projections. An example of such a projection is, I am a woman and I am 32 years old. This is really a statement about your body and not about you. Another example of a projection is, I'm a good person. I try my hardest to be kind to other people. This is really a statement about what you believe about your psychological self or your mind. It is really describing what thoughts you often have about yourself rather than your actual self. So it's so important to discern the difference. If I believe I'm a good person, and this is happening on the level of thoughts, and good or bad will come from a definition of what is wanted, what I want and value, and not wanted and bad will be viewed from that place too. So if I'm really holding on to this idea that I'm a good person, it's going to feel better than the idea that I'm a bad person. But I will also still be vulnerable to people questioning those projections, as we're going to see in a moment. Our projections about ourselves are who we think we are. We are so identified with these projections about ourselves that if I was to stop 10 people on the street and ask them to describe themselves, they would probably describe what their physical body is like, but they would say, I am male or female. If pressed for more detail, eventually they would begin to describe their minds and not themselves. Again, they would say things like, I like learning French and I love Chinese food. Caught up in these projections, caught up in these projections are what we want for ourselves. So our desires are inside these projections, what I want, and how we would like our life to unfold so that we feel happy. Not only do we have projections about ourselves, but we also have them about other people, events, the world in general, and more. So most of us have never really got to know who another being is. The more time we spend with someone, really what we're getting to know is what we think and feel about that person and the experiences we've had based on what we were thinking in the past. So have we ever actually met another person? Or are we, when we're with that being, more experiencing what we think about them? We may have a mental picture of what we think someone is like, and we are convinced that it is true. One neighbour may try to take your parking space, so you built an image of them in your mind that they are mean and rude. Yet another neighbour may invite that same person round to their house and be very good friends with them, and have a mental image that they are a very kind person and a good friend. We must come to see that our projections about others and ourselves are in no way true. They are subjective and often differ based on what we experience in the moment. So I could be convinced that I really like you, and then you might say something that triggered a response inside, and I might change my mind that I don't like you anymore. We're always doing this kind of thing, or the opposite is always happening inside. We may do something ourselves that rubs up against this idea that I'm a good person. So we may change our mind about ourselves. I'm really not who I thought I was. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing well enough. So we would all like to think that our ideas are the truth, but they are a virtual world that exists only inside our head. Sometimes, in the case of social causes, religion, media, politics, and others, we can have thousands of people agreeing with our projections, and we feel even more justified in having them. A major key to being able to forgive anyone of anything is to see that people cannot actually hurt us. They can only hurt our projections about ourselves or others. Everyone is stuck in their own projections, believing them to be reality, and believing that everyone else has the same projections. This is so important to come to understand that we all feel, at least initially on the pathway, that how I think and feel about this being is how they actually are. How I think and feel about the world, how I think and feel about myself, is how I actually am. And it's only later on that we can come to have an understanding that I've experienced myself, this other being, the world, this particular way, because that's what I've been experiencing, my projections about them, and not actually, what is really happening. We'll look at some examples to illustrate this point. Example 1. You're happily engaged to be married to someone you love very much, and you find out that your best friend has been seeing your fiancé without your knowledge. You feel furious, hurt, betrayed, and unable to forgive your friend and your fiancé. Most people will believe here that the fiancé and his friend have done something that has hurt them completely. But if we really slow down and take a look at what is happening here, we'll see that the actions of the fiancé and the friend have destroyed the projection that I am going to be married to this person and we will live a long and happy life together. So if I'm really believing I'm projecting into the future, my projection is that myself and this being will be together for a long time, we'll be very happy, a loving, honest, open relationship, then the actions of the fiancé and the friend have actually destroyed that projection. And that's what feels so bad inside. Something I was sure that was true has been disproved, but it's not the same as something actually hurting us. We've hurt our ideas about the world or some other beings have been hurt, have been destroyed. And it's so important to know the difference, to really come to discern that. It also has destroyed the idea that you and this best friend will stay friends forever. Example 2, you lend your friend some money to help when they lost their job and couldn't pay their bills. You told your friend that you needed the money back by a certain date, and now that date has elapsed and they have not paid you back. You needed that money to pay a bill of your own, and so you go to see the friend and tell them that you need your money back today. When you get to your friend's house, you see they have used the money for other things in the house, and they do not seem to be as needy as they have implied. I had a few friends like this in the past. In a flash, you'll see that they have lied to you about why they needed the money, and perhaps knew a while ago that they could not pay it back, or worse, that they had no intention of giving it back. Now you are in trouble because you need that money to pay your bills this month, and there's nothing you can do to get it back. Now you may feel that they have hurt you by not telling you the truth sooner, or perhaps even deliberately misleading you to get money from you, and you cannot forgive them for that. We can look more closely to see that there was a projection about this particular friend, that they were trustworthy, honest, and fair, and that this has been destroyed by their actions. You may have also had a projection about yourself, that you were always a good judge of character and knew that lending money is the right thing to do. There could also be a projection too that you're a good person, and if you help other beings, they will help you. Again, all these projections have been crushed by these actions. So we are in no way saying that to forgive ourselves or to forgive another being is condoning their actions, or that we're going to, even coming to see that my projections about this person I'm lending money to have been destroyed doesn't mean I'll just say, okay, you can have, next time they come knocking. In fact, you're much more likely to be able to take the appropriate action next time and not act from your projections instead. So forgiveness is a very empowering thing, meaning that you are empowered to take action that is right for you and for everyone involved. To lend this person money again when they know they have no intention of paying it back or won't be able to do so is only going to add to their guilt about you as well, how they feel about you. So you're helping them in that situation, helping yourself. So forgiveness doesn't make you a doormat. It doesn't make you too vulnerable. In fact, it protects you from making the same error in judgment the next time. Even if a person does something to hurt your physical body, they really cannot hurt you. They are hurting your projections that you will live a long and healthy life, or that the person that injured you is nice, kind, and would never do anything to hurt you. This may seem hard to understand at first, but if we look at why we look after our physical body, we'll see that if it is in good health, we have projections that we will live longer, feel better, and experience more. Anything that damages our body will feel bad because it has damaged our projections about our longevity and our health. You are not your body or your mind. You are the witness of both of these. Nothing can hurt you unless you choose to believe that you are your mind and its projections. Even then, it will only seem to hurt you. So if I'm sure that I am this body and mind, and something either hurts my body or something hurts my projections, then I will feel that I've been hurt. But even then, it's not actually so. Even then, I'm already something that is not capable of being damaged. That's the whole reason for lesson 3, is to come to understand the difference between yourself and your projections, so that you won't be walking around your life sort of waiting unconsciously to be triggered by these projections being tripped up. If you know that you are not your projections, and nothing you think about yourself or the world is absolutely true, then nothing is going to be able to hurt you ever. So it's really worth understanding the difference. Expectations, projections, or ideas are just thoughts, and thoughts cannot really be hurt. Through the actions of others, we can come to see that our thoughts about the world, ourselves and others are not as true as we would like to have believed. We may even be forced to admit that they are not true at all. Once this realization really deepens in your consciousness, you'll come to see that you can live from this place where you never get hurt again by anything that life can throw at you. Even if someone deliberately set out to cause you emotional pain, you can now see that it is not possible. Only we can cause ourselves to suffer if we insist on believing that we are our thoughts. We have a mind, but we are not that mind. It works for us as a functionality, but it can only think about things. Our mind's thoughts about reality are not the same as the actual reality. Exercises for lesson 3. So take a look back at lists A and B you made in lesson 2. So in lesson 2, for the homework exercises, what we were doing was making 2 lists. Of list A, all the things that I feel wronged or I've done to someone else that I want to work on forgiveness for. So list A was all the things I feel able to forgive right now, and list B was all the things I don't feel able to forgive about myself or others right now. So for each list, see if you can identify what projection you had at the time that was hurt by the actions of the people involved. If you find this difficult to do for some, then that's okay. And this does not have to be done all at once. Seeing our projections can be a strange experience and liberating and shocking at the same time. It's enough for now that you're coming to see that the reason the things on your lists hurt is because it threatens the mental image you have or have had about yourself or the world. As we said in lesson 2, our left brain works on assumptions and beliefs about ourselves and our environment. It makes decisions based on these assumptions, and when they are threatened, it can feel as though our center of focus or our compass has been lost. We all have felt that feeling in the pit of our stomach when something happens that absolutely crushes our assumptions about life. So if you've had something like that happen in your life, the reason it feels so bad is because it finally forces you to question whether your assumptions about yourself or the world or another being are true. And quite often when someone says or does something that we really feel hurt by, it's because we really have believed these projections about this person. Now, I'm not saying, that you shouldn't have any thoughts about someone. I'm just saying to understand the difference that no being is really definable by thought, because you're not definable by thought. If you're not your mind, then how relevant is what mind is saying about any person in particular? And mind can never know what is actually true. Mind can only know what it thinks is true, and they are very, very different things. Sometimes quite actually the opposite. This lesson has been successful if it has brought you to see that you have the assumptions and projections. Sorry, let me start that again. This lesson has been successful if it's brought you to see that you have assumptions and projections that you believed were you, and that only those can be damaged. You cannot be damaged ever. With reflection on the information in this lesson, you'll come to see that nothing can hurt you at all. No person, situation, or authority can hurt you, and they never have been able to. The rest of your life, you'll never be hurt again, nor can you hurt others accidentally or by deliberate effort. One who sees he is not his projections is free from pain and suffering forever. It's worthwhile spending some time on that, and maybe you want to go back and look at your own projections and where your life isn't flowing as well as it could. It'll be where these projections are really, life is asking you to really look at these projections and see if you want to still keep experiencing from that level of a virtual reality. And you're actually even in satsang because you don't want to do that anymore. You want to experience what's actually true rather than what we think about someone, what we think about ourselves. So the last lesson of this course is chapter 6, the real cause of unforgiveness. In this fourth and final lesson of the course, we'll look at how we complete this process of forgiveness. We have made amazing strides so far in our journey to forgiving, and by now you should be seeing and feeling the benefits of moving beyond what has held you back. There is a final stage to the forgiveness process to complete your understanding of yourself, others, and why humans often behave in ways which can leave us feeling vulnerable and hurt. As always throughout this course, we will learn some new information and begin to use it to rise to a new level of consciousness where we'll be able to forgive effortlessly. So the ability to forgive automatically and effortlessly comes from a certain level of consciousness. As we said back in lesson 1, it's not something you should already be able to do. That is not true, and you are where you are. And as you continue in your awakening, forgiveness will be a good side effect of that. Forgiveness of yourself, first and foremost. An absolute inability to believe in any shoulds or shouldn'ts about yourself or anyone in the end. The original sin or the fall from grace. We may all have heard of the original sin or the fall from grace that has been given a negative meaning by some cultures and religious authorities. There is an idea that there is something inherently wrong in the human psyche that has caused us to be wrong somehow. This idea is so deeply rooted in our culture that most of us grow up with some amount of self-esteem issues and feel guilty deep down for something that we don't even understand or remember. And I remember this from my own journey, just this deep-seated feeling that I was inherently wrong or not how I'm supposed to be, that there was something that needed fixing about me. And if you've ever encountered that feeling, it's kind of deep down in ourselves, and it drives most of our actions. It even drove me to awakening. That's why I first came to the pathway, to try to fix myself. But then as the awakening deepened, I began to see that I don't really need fixing, and nor does anything. And this feeling is inherent, this core feeling in every human being that I come across, that there is something inherently wrong or bad about us, and it's just not true. Where it came from, who knows, but we're going to work on transcending that. If we look at the original meaning of the word sin, we can see it is derived from Latin and Hebrew words that mean to miss the mark or to be ignorant. It can also have a meaning that something was done unintentionally. We can learn from this that any flaws that humans may have are species-wide, and nobody is exempt from this. We must begin to look at how we feel about ourselves with greater clarity. We must stop believing that we fell out of heaven as someone not quite up to the standard. We can come to see that we do not need to earn a place in heaven, nirvana, or whatever your particular beliefs are. We are perfect as we are. Our flaws are inherent in the way we are designed, and they have to be so. We didn't fall from grace. We emerged out of love. All is as it should be. So the meaning of this word sin has been given a very negative connotation. And even if we never actually say that word, it's inherent in our psychological self that I am not who I'm supposed to be. I'm not what I'm supposed to be. And it's just not true. All human beings have to start from this place of separation and in this believing that I am a separate being. And nobody is exempt from that. It doesn't mean that you were made wrong. It doesn't mean that if we may have done some actions in the past that were selfish or self-centered, doesn't mean that you are inherently wrong or bad. It just simply means you are operating from the wrong idea of who you are. And you couldn't even choose you had to have that idea. It's just how we start off. And it's really that way so that the self can come to experience consciously its awakening back into being its unlimited nature. So nothing has gone wrong with you ever. It's really important to really begin to move away from this idea that we are damaged goods. You know, the damaged software is not the same as damaged goods. And we have some strange ideas about ourselves that cause these actions, but it's not the same as you being inherently wrong or needing to change. So important. Human beings are unique in the world because we have the ability to think and have complex thoughts about ourselves and others. Our brains are much more evolved than most other species, and as such we have the ability to choose our behavior, words, and actions based upon our level of consciousness. We are also the only species that has the ability to question what we are, why we exist, where we came from, and other spiritual important questions. With the possibility for these evolved thoughts came also the opposite. The highest and the lowest behaviors of all human beings can be seen on the planet. Most of the lowest behaviors make the daily news headlines. To understand why human beings behave in ways that animals would not do helps us to begin to forgive in an even deeper way. We have learned before that most human beings can only access the left side of their brain on a regular basis, and that this side is responsible for keeping us safe by measuring differences, analyzing information quickly, making value judgments, and assigning meaning to an experience or a person. It's derived from the old animal primitive brain, which is instinctive and works on the fight or flight mechanism to decide if something is a threat, something is to be pursued or eaten, or is a potential mate. So the left brain is functioning from this place, even if we're not aware of it, and it's doing it in a complex psychological way, but it's the same basic drive behind it. In order for the left brain to function correctly and make a quick decision, it must be able to instantly judge the difference between itself and the thing it is perceiving. As animals evolved from simple organisms to more complex animals, this left brain function became more evolved, and also, at its peak, it evolved into the human brain and all of its ability to function as we know it. Our left side of the brain will immediately assume that the thing it's perceiving is other than itself. We have all become used to the idea that we are separate human beings, that we are this body that we live in, and we are alone, walking around in a world that contains other people, animals, plants, and inanimate objects. Our view of life is so familiar to us that we may never even question if it's still valid. Of course, we all take for granted the idea that I am me, this person, so much so that we assume everyone else is their own person too. We may even have many projections about the other people in our lives. We are not actually separate from anything or anyone. This may seem to be an incredible claim, but we can prove it right now. If we look for ourselves, we will not find anything that we can call me. Have a look right now and see if you can find yourself. A well-defined entity called me that has a shape and a solidity. You'll not find anything. So if I look for myself right now, I find a body and there may be thoughts and emotions, but can I find Helen? Can I find a separate being called me when I actually look? And in fact, all I find is this insubstantial emptiness, nothingness, the silence of something, the real being, that is not a separate entity. So if I'm not a separate entity, is everything else actually other than me? Is it really different to me? What we are is not a thing at all. We're not separate people. We are the one being that is expressing itself as all of us, and it's unique in its appearance, but not separate. Our bodies are separate. Separation was never true. It only seemed to be so because we think from our left brains. So if we consistently put attention on what is different about each human being, the way each human being speaks, what they like, what they prefer, what they look like, how they dress, what they do for a living, on and on it goes, then they are going to seem very, very different and separate to us. If we put attention consistently on what their essence is, what they are made out of, who they really are, in the core of their being, then they're going to seem exactly the same as us. There's going to seem like there's no difference. If we're willing to look and absorb the truth, we'll consistently find that we are not what we thought we are. We'll find a kind of space-like feeling, an emptiness or nothingness. This can be scary at first when you first notice it, but I urge you to be brave and keep looking. You've always been this formless no thing. You do not have a shape or definable qualities like your body. You do not age or die, and you were never born. What you really are is infinite, formless awareness. You are the intelligent principle that animates the body. You are the source of the life force energy. This formless awareness cannot be separate, cannot be sliced into many beings. There can only be many human bodies, but only one being. How does this knowledge help us forgive? When we begin to see that there is nobody else, it can begin to end all fear. All humans, as humans, all of our actions are guided by this root fear that we are isolated and alone, and that there are many other beings that could hurt us. All of our beliefs, actions, and words come from this deep down sense that we need to protect ourselves from dangers that exist out there. And our animal brain tends to analyze anything that seems to be other than me. It analyzes in case it's something dangerous, and it's always on some level of alert. Consider the simple way we startle when someone steps up behind us and we were unaware of their presence. You can begin to see that the actions of every human being are by nature self-serving and narcissistic. This does not make them wrong. It's natural that every person would want to do whatever it takes to survive, and that it's also true for every animal and plant we see. As human beings, our mind, beliefs, and collection of projections about ourselves and others are also classed as things I need to protect by the left brain. So animals have this sense of wanting to protect their body. Human beings have that too, but we also include into our definition of ourself what needs protecting, all of our mental projections about ourselves, the world, all of our history, all of our future projections. All of that is included into this definition, this bubble of what I need to keep safe. And that's why we experience resistance when we're on the pathway, because we're working against this tendency to keep our projections the same, to not challenge them, to protect them. They are included in our sense of self, what we think we are. We would not have survived to evolve into Homo sapiens that we are today if we had not protected ourselves. The instinctive survival trait is inbuilt in everything we do as a human being, and we are usually incapable of doing anything else. As humans, our sense of self includes all that we think about ourselves, others, and our world. And if we perceive that those thoughts and beliefs are being attacked or threatened, we move to defend them, just as we would defend an attack on our body. We treat an attack upon our projections as just as serious as an attack on our body. This may seem incredible, but if you look at the start of every war, you will find someone's projections were threatened. Only later were our actual bodies threatened or harmed. Our projections are so highly valued and prized that we would risk our bodies to defend them. We are incapable of distinguishing between our body and our projections until a certain level of consciousness. Most human beings believe that they are their thoughts, and without them they will die. As incredible as this may sound, it is true. So this is the basis of real forgiveness emerging, to understand that Most human beings cannot understand the difference between their projections and their body that is automatically included in their sense of self and protected as such and defended as such. And you can probably remember a time from your own pathway where you were sure that you were your thoughts. You were sure that your mind was you, that you are your mind. Only in hindsight, later can we look back and see that that's not true. That's what we're learning in Satsang, we're coming to see. And for anyone that hasn't reached that level of consciousness yet, it's not that they won't change their beliefs, it's that they can't because this self-protective mechanism is functioning inside their own self, just as it was for us before. So dealing with the world, dealing with yourself and other beings from this understanding is fundamental to having peace, and then being able to forgive others and empowering them with your peace, that they may also be able to experience a change in their own selves. When love begins to prevail, when we begin to access right brain thinking, we are capable of actions, thoughts, and speech that we were not before. We are able to try to understand, to put things into context, and to make a decision from a more informed place rather than a quick analysis and decision based on how it appears things are. The urge to understand is really the emergence of love, and this is a consequence of using this side of our brain more. Only once we have been able to access this side of our brain can we begin to see that actions taken to defend our projections will probably have a negative impact on others. We're finally able to consider the needs of others above ourselves. This is a skill that a large percentage of the human population does not have yet. It begins to emerge with parenthood, and we can see how a mother or father will sacrifice themselves for their child without a thought. It's the first time we see such behavior in the animal and human kingdom. Moving on from always thinking of our needs and wants, we can begin to consider others in our plans and desires. The final evolution of humanity, however, is to realize that there are no others at all. That was simply an illusion caused by perceiving life through the left side of the brain and living in a world of me and everyone else. When we live from a level of consciousness where we know deeply that all we see and perceive is us, our actions begin to change, our words and our deeds begin to be loving and wise. We would, of course, still take action to stop someone from hurting us or someone that we love, but we would do it only when necessary. At this level, humans are capable of love, compassion, charity, selfless service to other human beings. Innate in the awareness that all is us is the idea that everyone is equal and yet unique. Everyone is deserving of our love, and that their actions may come from a limited place at the moment, but they have no other choice. Everyone is acting out a very real seeming fear, and they cannot help it. We must come to see that as humans evolve and the idea that they are separate loses its power, then our actions as a race will change too. Until then, we can begin to have compassion for those stuck at lower levels of consciousness, because they have no choice but to keep making the same errors of judgment based upon the faulty premise that I am this body, and that when it dies, so do I. Conclusion. What you have learned in this course will give you a solid foundation to begin to forgive deeply. To forgive yourself and others is really to forgive humanity for being limited in some ways. Limited, but not wrong. Unconditional love will begin to emerge naturally from digesting what you have absorbed and applied. Unconditional love does not mean that you blindly accept the actions of others, but rather that you love a person for what they really are. A human being limited by their brain function, fear, and a self-protective urge. Being human affords us the highest and lowest of choices each and every moment. What we choose today and say is limited by our previous choices, and often it takes someone with a higher level of consciousness to facilitate new choices. We can all be that guiding light for each other. When we do, we'll move from unconditional love to oneness, which is the highest form of love there is. Oneness does not see any separation at all, and we see only ourselves wherever we look. We all inherently love ourselves and want to survive, and we will encourage all of humanity to do this as we evolve. Eventually, our sense of self will encompass the whole universe if allowed, and life really can be quite magical from there. Just as we have needed to make all of our previous errors in judgment in order to evolve to where we are now, so too we would not begrudge any other being from having the same learning experiences. It's only by making mistakes that we can choose a higher choice next time. Exercises for lesson 4. Number 1, see if you can indeed find yourself when you look. You'll find your body, your mind, and emotions, but where are you? Number 2, see if you can describe yourself as this formless awareness. Find out if you have an edge or a boundary. Number 3, contemplate that if you cannot find an end to the formlessness that you are, then you must be everything and everywhere. Number 4, reread through all the previous exercises and make a note of any areas you still cannot forgive. Note that there is no other person to forgive. Ask for help if you need it from any divine source. Any unwillingness to forgive is really an unwillingness to evolve and flourish into your highest possible expression you are capable of right now. If it is a desire to hold on to a belief in me and others, is it worth losing the peace, love, and joy that naturally emerge from living as the one being? Thank you for loving yourself enough to participate in this course. This is not the end, but a beginning of possibility for you. So that's the end of the forgiveness course. Next week, I'm going to start to read from the Abundance, Manifestation, and Desire course. So if you have any questions, or if you want to share something based on what I've read today, or anything in particular that was shared in Satsang, if you want to click on the participants section and click on raise hand, it'll let me know that you want to ask a question or to share. So I hope you've enjoyed the forgiveness course, and I hope you've come to see that it might not be what you thought it was, forgiveness, and that it's much more accessible than perhaps we may have thought of. And coming to a deep forgiveness of our own self allows us to begin to forgive all of humanity. And also, more importantly, I think it moves into a place where we're not going to set ourselves up for future hurts, as we began this lesson with. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I'm going to go on to the Abundance, Manifestation, and Desire course next time, because I in my own path I had many strange ideas about desire and what abundance was and how to work with desire. It's a question that comes up very, very often in Satsang. We've heard that there is this desireless place, and most of us still have a lot of strong desires. So that's the basis for writing this this next course that we'll discuss next week. Okay, so the question from Sophie, whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good morning. Okay. Really drinking in all that truth that was just pouring in. So thank you. Really. So I want to sort of share, because I want to try and get some sort of deeper understanding as to certain behaviours.
Mm-hmm.
I am more aware of them in a gentle non-judgment, not being quite as judgmental of them and more forgiving towards them. Yet there's this aspect that just in my energy which just utterly collapses, and I need to sleep. I just go to sleep. Yeah. I can sleep forever. I can't do anything in my environment, and if I start to do something, it won't get completed. I'll just kind of crash out halfway through. Or and this has been there for a long time, and when it's there, there's this, when something in my environment triggers even more, like some very painful situation, like just now a whole garden that was very precious was totally decimated by the council, and so it kind of re-triggers like a head trauma or some kind of traumatic birth experience or whatever it is. So again, my response is just to go into this like unconsciousness or going to sleep, and well, I can allow all that to be there and I'm okay with it. I just really want to try and gently come to some higher way of response where it's not serving. I know from hearing your satsang that ultimate, and I'm feeling the knowledge, the beingness that is unchanged, that is not depressed or contracted so it needs to go to sleep. I know I'm not there, yet it's very, very strong in its manifestation. Mm-hmm. I just really want to clear it. I want to sort of somehow move to that knowing where it's lived, Yeah, it's quite intense to share this publicly.
Well, you're doing really, really well, and it's not easy to look at these things, and just a willingness to share it sometimes will begin to change it, because you're saying that I deserve happier times in this by, sort of coming forward and sharing it. So well done to you. It's not the easiest thing, but you're probably even feeling right now some sense of limitation leaving just by being willing to talk about it. Usually when we have some reaction like this in my own pathway, it's usually some urge to avoid feeling something. Some very basic human instinct is to avoid pain, isn't it? To move towards pleasure and to avoid pain is how we're all hardwired initially, and that is still functioning for most of us, of course, when we enter the spiritual pathway. And the more that we're waking up and feeling that beingness, the more some of these emotions can come to the surface that perhaps we haven't been able to process from our old sense of self. And as they come up, there are going to be some of them that the idea arises that this is, I can't deal with this. And this may never be a conscious thought, but we all have our unconscious ways to avoid feeling and dealing with these emotions. So whether we're, for myself, it was alcohol, Netflix, chocolate, shopping on eBay, even meditation. If I go and do some deep meditation, I'll feel peaceful. But even that was a way of avoiding being with what was coming up in this moment. And it's natural and it's not anything we're doing wrong, but as you so beautifully said, there must be a higher way that we can deal with this now. So we can start to look at what is it that I don't want to feel and why. We can sit with a pen and paper and a cup of tea, and there might be just one emotion in particular. For me, it was fear. I just had this real deep-seated feeling that I couldn't feel it. I couldn't. at all. And I had to really sort of sit with not when I was actually feeling fearful. In between times, I would think, why don't I want to look at this? Some part of us does, hence the question, and some part of us doesn't. If you can just love yourself, that there is some part of you that doesn't want to feel this, and just ask gently to be shown why, what the idea is. Usually it's because there's some sense it's going to overwhelm us, or it's going to be too much when we actually feel it. And that's been our experience perhaps many times, that it's been too strong. So something inside does this self-protective mechanism that we were talking about in the book, and just kind of shuts down. Okay, enough. And if you sit in satsang long enough, you'll see people actually do that. I've been sat in talking to someone, and they're right in front of me, and they fall asleep, and they're really trying to hear what I'm saying. They really want to hear, but this protective mechanism comes in. So we don't have to blame ourselves for that, though. Can you get a sense of that? That is just what's happening now. And just by not judging that, as you're doing so well, you said, you're not judging it, you're just letting it happen. But we can just ask the question, is there a higher way to deal with this? Is it really even working to kind of avoid it? Or am I feeling it anyway? Is it sneaking out the sides? When I found I was running away from fear, it was kind of sneaking into my life everywhere, through the cracks in my defenses and my self-protective mechanism. So just to ask, is this defense mechanism really working anyway? And is there a better way to deal with it? And you don't even have to know what that is right now. Just the openness, even the willingness to look at something. That's all you can ever be responsible for, your willingness to look at whatever it is we don't want to see. Nothing else you are responsible for at all. Once you have a willingness to look, and a recognition that I've been subtly, very, very subtly avoiding, for good reason, because we can't deal with these as an egoic sense of self, then it can begin to, just in that openness of being willing to look, it can begin to shift, which you might even be feeling a little bit of now, something moving inside, Just to not blame ourselves for not being able to look at this stuff before either. If I'm convinced I am that being, that separate being, and I've convinced I've done something, or whatever it is that's being triggered, I cannot look at it from there, because I will feel that I am my projections and me is what I'm believing, and they will be destroyed if I look at them. So only now can we look, that you're starting to get a bigger definition of what you actually are, an experience of that. With that experience of what you really are comes the power and the courage and the clarity, bit by bit, to look at this stuff. And you don't have to look at it all at once. It's enough to see at first, okay, maybe this is an unconscious avoidance of things that I feel threatened by. And what we all feel threatened by more than anything is our own emotions inside. That we sort of intuitively know we're going to have to look at these as we wake up more. But if you can see that it is a natural way that we all deal with it. Every human being is unique in the way that we avoid dealing with our stuff. But we all do avoid dealing with it until we don't. Most of us are totally unaware that that's what's been happening. And it's been actually a very necessary thing until now to not look at it, because it's just not a good place to look at things from as ego. So just the willingness to see what the ideas are behind facing this. Is there an idea in there that is going to overwhelm you, that once you open up to it, you won't be able to close it off again? All these ideas are not true, but we have deeply believed them. I had this idea, if I finally let myself feel the fear, it's just going to be this Pandora's box that I can never close again. but it's not true. You can feel as much as you want to of it, and then distract yourself on purpose somehow. Can you get a sense of that going on inside?
So when you're feeling it from a place of being. So like you'd feel it in meditation. You see, I had a lot of many years with a teacher who I had a lot of those kind of feelings coming up, and to face them. So it's kind of still surprises me that I still have this such extreme shutdowns where I just kind of, because I kind of think I've been through, it's like I've felt so much. I can't, but obviously it's still, there's still, maybe it's, as you're saying, there is feelings that I just feel I can't face. They're too overwhelming. Maybe they're, a sense of anger or something, that, or fear. I mean, I think they're all part of the same opening, whether you call it anger, fear, or sadness.
It's all a general residue, isn't it, of being deeply believing I'm a separate being.
Yeah. So so would you say, like, feeling it in meditation, allowing it to be there, rather than because like if I'm sort of crashed out, there's no, it might be processing on another level. But
there is some of that, but the most effective thing to do, and the reason it's still going on now, even though you've felt a lot of it, is because the seed thought, the root thought behind it, is still being sustained and believed until until we've actually come to a clear recognition. So I can feel, if I've got anger or fear, I can feel it and feel it and feel it, but the idea that's causing that fear is still in place until I've seen through it, which is what you can now look at from the recognition of what you really are isn't a thing. It isn't, it's this beingness that you were describing. So you can take the idea behind the emotion. So if it's fear, for example, we feel in danger, we feel unsafe, we feel I'm not safe. And we can ask, is that true for the beingness? And we can begin to question that. It's true for the ego, but is it true for what I really am, that I'm not safe? And then we can begin to undo this idea that's generating more fear. It's now that, so you can sit with a cuppa, when you're feeling okay, and just look at the ideas that come up. So anger is a deep-seated feeling that life isn't fair, or I can't get what I want, and again, it's been backed up by all these experiences we've had. Guilt, is saying something, I'm not good enough, I need to be better than I am. So we can begin to question these ideas underneath the emotion that are generating the emotion, that we deeply believe these ideas, and they create the emotion that's ongoing. But from a recognition of what you actually are, however far that's proceeded, we can come to see that might not be true for me now. Is it true for the beingness that it's not good enough, that it needs to be better, or that it's not safe? Whatever the sense is, I can't get what I want, is that true for the beingness itself, the real self? And you'll gradually start to unsubscribe from these ideas that are true for my separate sense of self, not true for me. Can it be hurt? Can it be damaged? Can it be unworthy? All of that we take for granted as a human being is simply not true from the real place. So you can feel them when they come up, but just as important as the feeling the emotions now is to question if they're still true, the ideas. Can you continue to believe that you're not good enough and keep seeing that you are the beingness? The two are incompatible, aren't they? So this one's coming up to re-examine now from the clarity, which you cannot do effectively until you've had a deep seeing of what you actually are and an experience of it. It's a really good question. It's a really good share, because it's going to help a lot of people. A lot of people. It's we can get very good as separate beings at being with our emotions and feeling them, but they're still going to keep on being generated, you know, because we're still believing the idea behind it. And waking up is coming to firstly see what you actually are, but then also as a consequence seeing what you are not. You are not that person that wasn't good enough or that wasn't safe. It's been deeply experienced as true, but it's sort of coming out of that dream now, isn't it, and waking up. So with the intelligence that comes from the real being, you can start to really question, and you're not at the mercy of these assumptions anymore. You know, it's not a difficult process. It's just, you know, is it really true what I've been assuming about myself? Most of us, we've just been assuming it for so very long that we don't even know we're doing it. You know, we don't know we're even sort of operating through that belief. So life is showing you now what is no longer true for you, and asking you to question that based on what you've seen yourself to be in your satsang.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Very much so, yeah.
It's a healthy mechanism to avoid dealing with pain if we don't have a way to deal with it, you know. It's a self-protective thing, isn't it? And it'll go on for as long as it's needed, but once we've got a better way to deal with it and the source of the pain, then it'll probably just fall away on its own, you know.
Yeah.
There's some things on my website, how to use questions to go beyond these beliefs. There's some free ebooks on there, how to use contemplation to move beyond beliefs like I'm not good enough, etc. So have a look at that, have a read of that, helenhamilton.org, and it'll just help you in this process. So awakening is more letting go of what we thought was true about ourselves, a seeing on one hand, and then a discarding of these beliefs that have caused us such pain, you know, over the years, over the lifetimes probably.
Yeah. I mean, even now sharing it, you can see that there's some, you know, there's this kind of emotion arising around, there's a relief, but there's also this kind of, and it's that letting go of the whole structure that is, that has that kind of, maybe it's fear of really returning to who I am, you know.
There's sometimes a little bit of that. Mostly it is the ego's self-protective mechanism that we were talking about. I have deeply believed I am my ideas. You know, if I've deeply believed I am not good enough, for example, then something within me will fight to protect when I want to question that, because it feels so true and it's been experienced as true. We've had experiences of it. So of course something inside says, well, why would you even question if that's true? Look at yourself, look at your situation, look at your life, look at what you're screwing up. But you can come to see that all is happening because of this idea, you know, and we start to really get to the most intelligent place to work with these things from, which you couldn't do at all until you'd had a glimpse of what you actually are. Actually, wait a minute, all that wasn't true. I might keep going back to it, you know, some allegiance may go back to it every now and again, but gradually you're coming out of that dream. It's a bad dream, isn't it? And then we want to come out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well done for sharing. Well done. Very brave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely. Ian and Maggie?
I'll be brief. I just wanted to say to Sophie, I felt this surge of love, and say how quite emotional, how brave she is to share like that. And she reminded me of me being able to show her emotion on, you know, every session. I cried, as you know, Helen, for months and months. I just cried with so much pain.
We used to put the box of tissues right in front of you in Satsang. I remember.
I was handed the tissues every time I walked in the door. So you just keep going, because it's worth looking at it and pushing through it. And very emotional here, but I just want to send you love, because I felt you were so brave.
Yeah. And that has benefited everyone.
Absolutely.
Everyone on this satsang, and everyone that will ever watch this, you know,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's just a willingness to finally look at it, isn't it? And that's
yeah.
lovely. Thank you. Okay. Unless there are any other questions, we'll leave it there for today. Okay, we will finish it there for today. Thank you for being with me today, and I hope you've enjoyed the forgiveness course. And namaste.